This is Lecture 5 in the course, The State of the United States Economy and Society. This lecture is titled Social Welfare Trends. Well, for some in our society, the 2008 crash had almost no impact on their quality of life. For others, the result was to destroy an already fragile existence. This lecture will offer some insight into the degree to which the lives of people at the bottom of our socioeconomic ladder have improved or not improved since then. In 2024, the number of people experiencing homelessness in the United States was the highest ever recorded, at 771,480 people. This was an 18% increase from 2023. However, when the American Enterprise Institute's Housing Center examined the data, they found that homelessness rates were higher in states reporting the most acute housing shortages. So take a look at this chart just for a few seconds to see the increase. And so we have to think about what's going to happen in 2026. A report issued in May back in 2018 in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology indicated that heart disease is the major killer of those who are homeless. Over half of the homeless do not have access to a consistent source of health care, so their conditions often go untreated. Smoking is the main source of cardiovascular disease, accounting for about 60% of deaths each year. Alcohol and drug abuse are additional causes. It is estimated that over 250,000, some 260,000 persons experiencing homelessness in the United States are members of families with at least one adult and one minor child. This estimate comes from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's 2024 data reported in August of 2025. Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York City, has directed the city's Department of Homeless Services to begin to deal with roughly 30,000 migrants still housed in emergency shelters. This number is down from more than 68,000 in December of 2023. Total homelessness exceeds 121,000 people in New York. California's homelessness plummeted in 2025, with the largest drop in 15 years, according to preliminary data, due to Governor Newsom's strategies to reduce homelessness, address encampments, and create shelter and support. Data from California communities reporting 2025 numbers show a 9% drop in unsheltered homelessness, bucking national trends by getting people off the streets and into safe shelter and care. Investments since 2019 have included the launch of the first in the nation Home Key program that has created nearly 16,000 homes across 250 projects and reached over 172,000 Californians. $2.25 billion through Home Key Plus to serve individuals with mental health or substance abuse challenges and veterans. Over $5 billion appropriated for homeless housing, assistance and prevention to support local jurisdictions in promoting housing stability and reducing homelessness. And $1 billion in encampment resolution funds to provide services and housing to help 23,000 individuals across 120 encampment sites transition from homelessness. As you can see from these statistics, the challenge is still awesome. The shortage of affordable housing is a major cause of homelessness everywhere. And in California, the problem has grown over the years as a consequence of the state's passage of Proposition 13, which works as follows. Proposition 13 established the concepts of a base year value for property tax assessments and limitations on the tax rate and assessment increase for real property. Passed by voters in June 1978, Prop 13 is an amendment to the California Constitution. Under Prop 13, all real property has established base year values, a restricted rate of increase on assessments of no greater than 2% each year, and a limit on property taxes to 1% of the assessed value, plus additional voter-approved taxes. When a change in ownership occurs, whether full or partial, real property is reassessed at its current market value as of the date of transfer. This establishes a new base year value for both the property's land and improvements. When new construction occurs, it is reassessed at current market value as of the date of completion. This establishes a new base year value for the property's newly constructed improvements only. At a meeting held at the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions in Santa Barbara, California during August of 1978, University of California economics professor Mason Gaffney offered a thorough analysis of the impact of Proposition 13 and the structure of California's property tax. Gaffney concluded that Proposition 13 turned existing property owners into land speculators and shifted the cost of paying for public goods and services to those who own no real estate or would be purchasing real estate in the future. His alternative was to exempt housing units from the tax base and impose an annual tax on land values only. He wrote, "The property tax levied on land values makes the landowner compensate the landless for the latter's exclusion in three ways. First, the landowner supports government. Second, he has to use his land to produce goods and services for consumers. Third, he has to offer jobs to workers to use his land. This combination seems hard on the property owner. On the other hand, exempting improvements satisfies the need to reward people for saving and accumulating capital." Outside of California, the conventional property tax remains in place except for a small number of communities in Pennsylvania, where a two-rate structure was constitutionally approved early in the 20th century. Pittsburgh adopted the tax shift, which was an integral part of its strategy to improve air quality and revitalize the city's downtown. Economists for a long time have tried to show that its structure and administration are neither efficient public policy nor fair to all taxpayers. As Mason Gaffney wrote often, the system penalizes the maintenance and new construction of buildings while providing a huge financial incentive to speculate in land. The result is ever-rising property prices and worsening shortages of affordable housing. Housing and Urban Development officials estimated in November of 2018 that there were about 38,000 veterans across the United States without stable housing on any given night. In January 2026, the number of determined to be homeless was around 33,000, roughly the same since 2024. Next, we'll take a look at affordable rental housing. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition reports that no state has an adequate supply of affordable rental housing for the lowest income renters. Across the nation, there is a shortage of 7.1 million affordable rental homes for the 10.9 million extremely low-income renter households. The continued decline in the number of publicly subsidized housing units is exacerbating the problem of homelessness all across the United States. The 2025 report by the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies states that many renters are cost burdened, meaning they use more than 30% of their income to pay for housing and therefore have difficulty paying for other necessities. The reported trends are not encouraging. Quote, "In 2025, households and housing markets face an ever more challenging environment. High income prices and elevated interest rates reduced home buying to its lowest level since the mid-1990s. Increases in both insurance premiums and property taxes have heightened financial stress on homeowners and landlords. And despite an abundance of new apartments, high rents have left more people than ever cost burdened and have contributed to a sharp rise in homelessness. Meanwhile, unprecedented destruction from wildfires has further highlighted the growing threat to the housing stock from climate-related disasters. At the same time, federal housing support is lessening, creating uncertainty regarding the availability of crucial assistance programs. The looming possibility of an economic downturn is exacerbating the nation's already enormous housing challenges. So let's take a look at the basic economic problem that exists in our society. The economic problem is easily understood. Where employment is strong and household incomes are relatively high, including the income of retirees, land prices are high and tend to keep increasing beyond the ability of individuals to afford asking rents for apartments or to accumulate sufficient savings to make a down payment and cover closing costs to purchase a property. When property markets become severely stressed by rising prices, a correction occurs. Where employment is weak and household incomes low, land and property prices fall and keep falling. In the most distressed neighborhoods, buildings or vacant lots cannot be sold at any price and end up in the community's own property inventory when taken for failure to pay fines and accrued property taxes. When potential tenants cannot afford to pay a rent sufficient to cover the cost of ownership, absentee owners defer maintenance, allow the property to be condemned, and walk away. The result is that all across the United States, there are millions of vacant, abandoned properties. Data published in January 2025 by ATTOM Data Solutions indicate that nearly 1.4 million single-family homes and condominium units were vacant at the beginning of the fourth quarter of 2024. Data released in January 2026 indicates this has not changed. Lenders initiated the foreclosure process on 289,441 properties in 2025, a 14% increase from the prior year and a dramatic rebound from the pandemic-era low in 2021, although these figures remain below pre-pandemic volumes. Texas, Florida, California, Illinois, and New York reported the largest numbers of foreclosure starts, with major metropolitan areas such as New York City, Chicago, and Houston among the most affected. Bank repossessions, real estate owned, filings increased 27% year over year, with 47,000 properties repossessed through foreclosure. Cities with significant numbers of abandoned properties often face population decline, economic shifts, or natural disasters, with Detroit, New Orleans, St. Louis, and Gary, Indiana frequently cited for large numbers of vacant homes due to historical economic issues, while areas like Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Florida see high vacancy rates as part of broader metropolitan trends, and cities like Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and smaller Rust Belt towns often appear on lists due to concentrated blight. A major challenge is increasing the supply, and more importantly, increasing the supply of housing that is affordable to the majority of people who need it. One response to the problem of affordability has been the development of very small houses to serve as transitional housing for the homeless. Small villages of tiny houses have been constructed in Portland, Seattle, Austin, Madison, and elsewhere. And of course, desperate people take desperate measures, as the bottom right photograph shows. Many others are choosing to purchase mobile tiny homes for reasons of affordability, reduced environmental impact, and as a lifestyle choice. These homes cost around $40,000 to have constructed. Owners need to obtain or lease the land separately. Factory-built housing, which includes manufactured and modular homes, is a leading strategy for increasing the supply of affordable housing in 2026. These homes are constructed in controlled factory environments and then transported to their final site, offering significant savings in time and money. Some city governments have responded to the long-standing problem of people, including families with children, living outside in tents and makeshift shelters by publicly funding what are described as safe sleeping sites. These are in no way meant to be a permanent solution. The real challenge, as I've written, is dealing with the systemic consequences of how government raises revenue to pay for public goods and services. Housing, which is a depreciating asset, ought to be fully exempt from annual taxation. Only the value of locations of land should be subject to taxation. Let's now take a look at food insecurity in America. A related social issue is the extent to which people are unable to afford adequate food for themselves and their families. Newsweek reported in September of 2024 that some 47 million people across the United States have experienced food insecurity in recent years. Statistics provided by the U.S. Department of Agriculture reveal that 13.5% of households experienced hunger due to a lack of food or money to purchase food during 2023. Arkansas, Texas, and Mississippi are the three states with the highest level of people going hungry. What causes food insecurity? The survey conducted in 2017 by the U.S. Conference of Mayors identified low wages, high housing costs, and poverty. None of this should be a surprise to anyone. The causes have not changed. What intensifies the risk of food insecurity is the addiction to narcotics, and impoverished communities face significantly higher rates of addiction. People make less than $20,000 per year are 3 times more likely to have an addiction to heroin than those making $50,000 or more. The U.S. Department of Agriculture published updated statistics on food insecurity in January of 2025, although the data came from 2023. This January's report indicated that 13.7% of U.S. households were food insecure in 2024. The department announced that these reports were being terminated as, quote, redundant, costly, politicized, and extraneous. As one would predict, households where one or more working-aged adults have a disability have a much higher incidence of food insecurity than households generally. During 2025, approximately 52.1% of disabled adults reported food insecurity in early 2025, which is more than double the rate, 20.5%, for adults without disabilities. Consistent with poverty levels, the households with the most severe food insecurity are single households with children. And within this group, the worst food insecurity is found in households headed by a mother with children. Approximately 18.4%, 14.1 million, of households with children experienced food insecurity at some point in 2024, a rate reported by the USDA in late 2025 that reflects a return to 2014 levels. Rural areas make up less than 66% of U.S. counties, but 90% of counties with the highest food insecurity rates. Key factors are lower wage employment opportunities, higher unemployment and underemployment, lower level of education, insufficient affordable child care, and an absence of public transportation. In 2024, black individuals and households experienced food insecurity at a rate of 1 in 4. The rate of food insecurity for white individuals and households was 1 in 10. In 2025, nearly 13 million adults aged 50 and over experience food insecurity. Many are forced to choose between paying for groceries and paying for needed medicines. Data released by the U.S. Department of Agriculture for 2024 indicates that 12% of the population, or 41.7 million people, receive food stamps through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Note how the number of SNAP recipients has recently increased to above the number of people officially categorized as being in poverty. Changes in the rules were adopted in July of 2025. Eligible recipients must have a gross monthly income no greater than 130% of the federal poverty line. For a 3-person household, this limit is $2,888. Food insecurity is widespread on U.S. college campuses. Current estimates suggest that as many as half of all undergraduates experience food insecurity while pursuing college degrees. Today, many campuses have created food pantries and meal sharing programs where students and faculty can donate surplus meals or groceries. A 2025 report issued by the Lumina Foundation in Indianapolis states that more than a third of all college students are experiencing unstable housing, poor health care, and difficulty affording meals. This is because almost half of them have no parental support. There is more to cover on who is poor in the United States. It is amazing how detailed the problem is. Poverty has always been a serious problem in the United States, particularly among persons of color, residents of some urban neighborhoods, and some non-metropolitan rural communities, the elderly, and newly arrived immigrants. While as a percentage of the total population, poverty gradually declined beginning in the late 1940s, the absolute number of people living in poverty continues to increase. A major societal disagreement exists over the extent to which government should intervene on behalf of the poor. There's no consensus on the causes of poverty. Is poverty primarily the result of individual behavior and poor decisions, or is poverty caused by systemic flaws in our socio-political arrangements and institutions, or some combination of the two? This map, generated in 2025 by the organization Data Pandas, lists Mississippi as the state with the highest level of poverty at 19.3% of its residents. Persons of color have had higher rates of poverty going back as far as statistics have been gathered and reported. Significant improvement in the living conditions of minority populations occurred after passage of civil rights legislation, but the percentages remain much higher than for whites. These are the 2024 figures reported by the U.S. Census Bureau. Nearly 80% of people whose heritage is that of a Native American tribal society do not live on a reservation. Most live in urban or suburban communities. This is largely the result of forced relocation by the United States government during the 1950s. Thus, the causes of poverty within the American Indian population involve factors that are qualitatively different from that of blacks or even immigrant groups. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 2023, 13.7% of children in the nation lived in poverty, meaning that they lived in a household with an income below the federally set threshold. As this 2025 map shows, most of the states with highest percentage of children in poverty are in the South. Now let's take a look at the state of senior Americans. The population of the United States is growing older each year. The median age in 2024 was between 38.3 and 39.3 years old, up from 35.3 years in 2000. There are now more than 59 million people in the United States aged 65 and older, which represents 18% of the nation's total population. However, reaching age 65 is no longer an automatic time for retirement. Approximately 11.9 million individuals aged 65 and older were estimated to be employed as of late 2025. The projection for 2026 is that 30.2% of those 65 to 74 and 10.8% of those 75 and older will be working. Of these, about 62% will be employed full-time. People are working later in life for a number of reasons. They are healthier and have a longer life expectancy than previous generations. They are better educated, which increases their likelihood of staying in the labor force. And changes to Social Security benefits and employee retirement plans, along with the need to save more for retirement, create incentives to keep working. U.S. retiree health care costs are forecasted to continue to increase at an average annual rate significantly higher than the anticipated general rate of inflation, and Medicare alone is insufficient to cover these costs. RBC Wealth Management estimates the lifetime cost of care for an average 65-year-old couple will be nearly $700,000, not including any long-term care costs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates the annual amount spent out of pocket on health care for a person age 65 or older at $6,500. The bottom 20% of Americans 60 and older, 15 million households, have no assets. About half of those 60 and older, a little over 27 million households, have an average income below what they need to cover their basic needs. Despite older adults' preference to age in place, 60% are unable to afford 2 years of in-home long-term services and supports. The main sources of income for people over 65 are Social Security, 39%, income from working, 25%, retirement plans, 19%, other assets, 14%, and other sources, 15%. Younger retirees derive more income from working and investments, while over half of older retirees rely heavily or exclusively on Social Security. For most individuals, a significant portion of household net worth is in the form of equity in a residential property. And of course, those who are age 55 and above are most likely to have repaid their mortgage debt or nearly so. The median figures are far more indicative of the financial situation of each age group. Half have more than this, half have less. Now let's take a quick look at senior owners compared to renters. The average net worth of homeowners continues to grow, while the net worth of renters tends to hold steady and be significantly lower than that of homeowners. The gap between owning and renting just keeps getting wider over time, making homeownership more and more desirable for those who are able to save and qualify for mortgage loan financing. The 2023 Land Market Survey issued by Realtors Land Institute and the National Association of Realtors calculated the value of residential land held by households at $18.6 trillion. They estimate that the value of land comprised 41% of the total value of household real estate assets. This is likely higher for seniors as their length of property ownership is often several decades and their homes being older are more deeply depreciated. Owners of a residential property age 62 and older experienced an increase in their unrealized net worth of $600 billion in the first quarter of 2024, reaching $14 trillion. As residential homes are assets that depreciate, most of the increase came from the increased value of the land owned. This map was created to show where land prices are most likely to decline in 2026 and for several years thereafter, based on the historical cyclical patterns of land markets. Seniors that have fully paid off any mortgage loan debt will be unaffected, or at least much less affected than younger adults who have only recently acquired ownership of a residential property. The poverty rate for people aged 65 and older is lower than for any other age group. Two major reasons are the equity in a residential property and benefits under the Social Security system. About 60% of those aged 65 and older own a residential property free of mortgage loan debt. ATTOM reported in December of 2025 that a number of property markets are beginning to experience considerable declines in value. This map identifies the 4 states with the largest number of properties for which more is owed than the properties are worth. The report went on to list California as the state with the greatest downside risk based on the level of unaffordability, the share of seriously underwater mortgage loans, foreclosure activity, and county-level unemployment rates. 16 of the 50 highest risk markets are in California, followed by 9 in New Jersey, 4 in Florida, and 3 each in Arizona and Texas. Some seniors continue to lose their property as a result of foreclosure after failing to meet the terms of a reverse mortgage loan. Deferring maintenance, falling behind on property taxes, or not carrying homeowners insurance constitute a default of the terms of a reverse mortgage. There continues to be a good deal of imprecision in the reporting of how many seniors lose their homes as a result of a default condition. There is no data made available on what portion of the 367,460 foreclosures during 2025 involved owners aged 65 or older. Industry representatives explain that many HECM foreclosures often occur after the last surviving borrower dies or moves away, and the heirs do not exercise the option to repay the loan and retain the property. So, what are we going to look at next? Next, we look at the impact of sports on our economy and on our society. And with that, that is the end of Lecture 5.